They wore the uniform of authority, but instead of upholding the law, they broke it in the worst possible way. This case shook the very foundation and trust Ghanaians place in their police. This is the shocking case of Cpl Valentino Gligah and Constable Abdulai Atiso versus the Republic. On July 18, 2003, officers Gligah and Atiso were convicted by Justice Evril Eninieboa on charges of rape, contrary to Section 97 of Act 29. Each received a sentence of 15 years imprisonment with hard labor. The officers subsequently appealed their convictions to the Court of Appeal, but their appeal was dismissed, upholding both the verdict and the sentences. The officers then pursued their case to the Supreme Court, seeking recourse and justice in the highest court of the land. The prosecution had presented evidence that on June 22, 1998 in Accra, the two officers raped Cynthia Nyante, a trader who sold second-hand clothing along Kinbu Road near the Central Police Station. According to the prosecution's case, Cynthia was conducting her usual business in the vicinity of the police station when the accused officers summoned her to their office and raped her in turns. Cynthia's own testimony painted a disturbing picture of premeditation and calculated abuse of power. She recounted being forcibly taken to a room where two foams had already been placed on the floor, suggesting that the assault was planned and not spontaneous. Her account was that Gligah initiated the attack, physically restraining her thighs, and had sex with her 4 times in succession. Atiso stood watch nearby, urging him to hurry before another officer walked in. And when Gligah was done, they switched places. She said they didn't give her a moment to even clean herself. There was no pause, there was no mercy, just pain. Following the assault, the officers simply opened the door and ordered her to leave. Cynthia testified that she cried out during the attack, but the closed windows prevented anyone from hearing her distress. Afterward, she went to Kantamanto Market to confide in her friend Salome about the assault by the two policemen. The prosecution's case was bolstered by compelling medical and physical evidence. A medical doctor who examined Cynthia testified about his findings, which revealed multiple abrasions and lacerations consistent with forcible sexual assault, along with the presence of seminal fluid. The medical evidence corroborated Cynthia's account of the violent nature of the attack. Additionally, a chief inspector and one other officer called Adeline provided crucial corroborating testimony. The officer confirmed that Cynthia's description of the room where the assault occurred matched exactly with the actual location, and Officer Adeline was asleep but was awakened by the noises in the room and spotted Cynthia within the vicinity of the station that fateful day. Most significantly, investigators discovered a broken earring belonging to Cynthia embedded in one of the mattresses. The accused officers were represented by lawyer Ahuma Okanse, a lawyer whose arguments the Supreme Court later described as brilliantly crafted. His defense strategy was unconventional. Gligah testified that he had an intimate relationship with Cynthia. She was once his girlfriend. He claimed that they had engaged in consensual sexual relations on 2 previous occasions, once at his quarters and once at the Station View Hotel in Tudu. Gligah asserted that his colleague, Atiso, was aware of this relationship due to their close friendship. According to Gligah's testimony, Cynthia claimed she had fallen pregnant and subsequently requested money for an abortion procedure. However, he claimed to have insisted on medical verification before providing the requested funds. Now, the officers contended that on the day, Gligah's refusal to provide the money without medical proof led to a heated verbal confrontation with Cynthia. They argued that the sounds heard by Officer Adeline were not cries of distress, but rather the raised voices from the financial dispute. Both accused officers categorically denied all charges of rape. Counsel for the officers also mounted a strong attack on Cynthia's credibility. First, they argued that Cynthia's account of Gligah having forcible sex with her for 4 rounds before Atiso took his turn was physically improbable and therefore undermined her reliability as a witness. Second, the defense highlighted what they characterized as a gap in the prosecution's evidence. They argued that the failure to call one ASP Colley, who was reportedly in charge of the room where the assault occurred, was a fatal weakness in the prosecution's case. The defense suggested that this witness's absence deprived the court of crucial testimony that could have provided additional context about the incident. The Supreme Court, led by Justice Jones Doche, JSC, established a crucial judicial precedent by defining carnal knowledge in precise legal terms. The court acknowledged that carnal knowledge had indeed occurred in this case and stated that carnal knowledge is the penetration of a woman's vagina by a man's penis. It does not really matter how deep or however little the penis went into the vagina, so long as there was some penetration beyond what is known as brushwork. Penetration would be deemed to have occurred and carnal knowledge taken to have been completed. The Supreme Court acknowledged the foundational challenge facing the prosecution. There was no direct eyewitness testimony to the alleged assault. No one was there except the victim and her alleged assaulters. However, the court demonstrated how circumstantial evidence, when properly assembled, could establish guilt beyond reasonable doubt. Like pieces of evidence, little, small threads, when put together, make a very strong rope. Cumulative circumstantial evidence could be as compelling as direct testimony. The court identified 4 critical pieces of circumstantial evidence that collectively supported the conviction. First, Cynthia provided a detailed and accurate description of the room where the assault occurred. Second, Cynthia's broken earring embedded in one of the mattresses. Third, Officer Adeline's testimony confirming Cynthia's presence at the station on the relevant date. And fourth, expert testimony confirming that Cynthia had been subjected to forced sexual penetration. The court addressed the defense's attempt to challenge Cynthia's claim that she was raped 4 times in succession. It acknowledged that sexual assault is experienced differently by each victim and trauma can blur the lines of memory, but the judges were clear. Just because Cynthia couldn't recount every moment with clinical precision didn't mean it didn't happen. Her claim of 4 rounds stood firm. The defense also made much of the fact that ASP Colley didn't testify, suggesting a gap in the prosecution's case, but the court was not convinced. It found that access to the room wasn't in dispute. The evidence showed both officers regularly entered the space, even though neither was officially in charge. The door was open, and so was the opportunity to commit the crime. The conviction was affirmed. The Supreme Court faced the question of whether to modify the 15-year sentence imposed by the trial court. The court made its position clear that when public officers whose jobs are to enforce the law turn around and abuse their power, their punishment must send the message. Police officers who betray the trust of innocent citizens, it said, deserved nothing less than harsh deterrent sentences. But despite that strong stance taking, the court didn't add a single day. The original 15-year sentence stood. The appeal was dismissed. But this case leaves us with some haunting questions. Could Cynthia's detailed description of the room have come from something innocent, maybe past visits to the station as a trader or even as a girlfriend? If so, how strong was that piece of circumstantial evidence really? And then the biggest gap of all, why was no DNA analysis done? Semen was recovered during her medical exam. A test could have confirmed beyond reasonable doubt whether it matched either or both of the accused persons. That kind of forensic evidence could have silenced all speculation. Instead, the case turned on testimony, trauma, and trust. In the end, the court believed her. What do you think? Follow Superlaw Jiu-Jitsu Studios for more real stories, real cases, real people.